بس انت Hullin Daf feel better Amud Aleph second to last line. Last thing we mentioned was in the middle of the sugya that to put the receptacle vessel under the meat that's roasting to capture the fats, you can't do that unless the red color liquid, the red colored meat loses the red, the blood drains. He said, how you know? So he said the first opinion was when the smoke rises, and Rashi didn't like that. Rashi said, no, it doesn't make sense because maybe only the bottom of the meat has let out the blood, but then maybe the top of the meat didn't. I'm gonna actually watch a different way of knowing. Let I can tell there's no way of knowing when to put the bedugi, the receptacle under the meat. Ella مش كارثة كالريحة. You can't assume the blood's gone. Therefore, what do? Put clumps of salt in the bottom by the bedugi, and when blood lands in it, it'll catch the salt and then it'll hold it to the bottom of the vessel. ومش fair. And then when you are ready to take the fats that are in the bedu, you take a little gently pour off the top layer so you don't get the blood clumps of salt. They say that when the liquid drains out, you can put the vessel to catch. Shmuel says, he says that blood ran before that if you want to slice bread, meat on top of a slice of meat on top of a loaf of bread, and the blood is extracting, you can't eat the bread because it absorbs. So we see that Shmuel holds that roasted meat does have residue of blood. Because the blood is being squeezed out of the pressure of the knife. Okay. Mar Nachman, if you salted fish and birds together, it's asur because they absorb the blood. The fish absorb the blood from the bird. The Gemara says, what's the case? Even cliche in Nukav is a case with a vessel that doesn't have a hole. I feel a fourth of a whole nine, or even two birds in the same pot, they would get blood from each other. Even clean Nukav, the vessel does have a hole. I feel like even a fourth nine, why isn't it mutar? The blood should drain out. مثل الإعلام بكليب من الكعب there is a hole. But the game wire fish are sore because Mishin did a food because his skin has a lot of holes and they're soft. Kadmei Pata, therefore the juices come out. The afad kamiti when the meat of the bird is tight, which slows it out. Therefore, when the fish stop letting out their blood, the juices, the bird is still letting it out. I mean, and then the fish gets that inside. That's why the fish are sore. One time, the meat of a slaughtered animal was salted for together with the meat of a tarif animal in a vessel that had a hole. Says meat kosher. Amalei, he said, pasuk says regarding to shiratim, the tameh ones, la'asur tiran v'ratavan v'kipash lahen. The word, the tameh ones in the pasuk is referring to the juices, the gravy, and the sediments. They're all asur. So to the terefa as well, the sediments and the juices are also asur. He's trying to tell them that it's asur. The Shmuel, why don't you just bring a proof from Shmuel? That much more Shmuel, but yeah, that's all the egg is like hot. Like, I would make and pickled is like cooked. So why don't you just bring a proof like that? The man says, even the Shmuel, the report from the case in Shmuel, I mean, I would have thought Hani made a demand and implies the blood. Avasiram, but not regarding juice and gravy, which is mutar otherwise. Mashma, therefore, we said over here as well that the juice and gravy non-kosher is also asur. Maybe we have a question. Dag shetahosh melachot dag tameh mutar. Kosher fish that was salted with a non-kosher fish is mutar. My lab shayish name and they're both salted, even though the juices went to each other. Gemara says la. Only the kosher fish was salted and the non-kosher fish was not salted. Therefore, the non-kosher fish did not let anything out because it wasn't salted. But the next part of the Brayta says over there. Tahor Maliach v'temet hafel. Mutar. If the kosher fish was salted and the non-kosher fish was not salted, it's mutar. Michla, which implies that the first case, the case where they're both salted. It is not two different cases. To explain what the cases were, and how do you read the Puratas as follows? Kosher fish are salted with a non-kosher fish mutar. Get what's that case talking about? When they realized when the kosher fish was salted and the non-kosher fish was not salted, it is mutar because the non-kosher fish did not go into the kosher fish. Hashem, it's not I can prove it to you. Both the first case and both them salted. If so, the first case we don't get where they're both salted and the kosher fish is mutar. Why would you need a second case to teach you that the kosher one is salted and the non-kosher one is not salted? Why would you need me to hadush? We move for sure mutar. Torah says you can't bring a proof from that. Imishum hala, it's not a proof. Because why? If you're talking about case, the first case, that it's mutar when both of them are salted. Tana Sefer Aglu Reja. The second case could be teaching you the meaning of the first part, meaning don't tell me that the first part talking about a case where it's salted and then unkosher fish is not salted. That's why it's mutar. Because why? Then for you to infer that both are asur if it's salted, if they're both salted. Tana Sefer Tahor Meliach v'Temet. Therefore, the Mishnah specifically, there specifically mentioned the second case of the kosher one salted and the non-kosher is not salted. Michal Deresh will teach you, or theoretically teach you, that the first case is Shnei Meluchim, and they're both salted. And it's still kosher. Okay, so we try to bring a proof. That wasn't a good proof. Tashma is bringing a proof from Sefer the Sefer from the next part of the Braita. So the non-kosher fish was salted, and the kosher fish was unsalted. It's asur. Seemingly, you're inferring from here that the non-kosher fish is salted and the kosher fish is unsalted, that the kosher fish is an asur. Hashnehem melochin shari, but the both of the mutar. The Gemara says not a proof. I did the Tana Resh as a hormel. Since we brought in the first part that the kosher fish is salted and the non-kosher fish is not salted, Tana Nami Sefer Tamei Meliach. Therefore, they mentioned another case, the reverse case, but it's not a proof. That would just mean that we would still agree that the kosher fish is a sewer and both of them are salted. Okay. סימן ביסר דמנח נפקודה. אמר שמואל, אין הבשר יוצא מידי דמו אלא אם כן ולא חול יפה יפה. Meat is not considered drained of his blood unless it's salted a lot. ומידי חול יפה יפה. And you also have to rinse it a lot. The Gemara says, Itmar. Ravuna says, מליח ומדיח. You first salt it, then rinse it. Matnit and Ambrose says, מדיח ומליח מדיח. Rinse, salt, rinse. ולא פלגי סמא חוגד. חדי לחלל בית לבחה. Ravuna, which did not mean to rinse it first, to my case where it was already rinsed by the butcher. Therefore, when you buy it, let's rinse it again. In the second case, we have to rinse it first when it was not rinsed already by the butcher. Ravimi with salt and meat with thick salt and then shake it off. We don't assume that we don't have to assume there's blood in the innards. And Tirigmas is one case, it's referring to the rectum, the stomachs, and the large intestines. You don't have to assume that there's a lot of blood there. You don't have to salt it a lot. Okay, much more. You can only put salted meat on a vessel that has a hole because you want it to drain out. Rav Sheshet would salt one piece of meat at a time in a vessel with a hole. Today, my time allow why would do two. Because he's worried that if it seemingly because why? Because he worried that if he does one at a time, two at a time, one will go into the other. But the problem is, that's the case, then you're salting one piece. It should also go from one to go out from the same piece and back inside. There's no difference. That's why you could do more than one piece at a time. You're not worried about what should help. Someone breaks, he's slaughtering the animal, and he breaks the neck before the soul left. He makes the meat heavy and robs people. And he causes the blood to be absorbed in the limbs. What does this mean? Great question. I'm happy you asked. So when you do shechita, the blood comes out the throat. If you're breaking the animal's neck while it's being slaughtered, the animal doesn't have that discharge of blood. And therefore, it remains inside and it keeps the meat and limbs extra heavy with blood. And he's technically overcharging, the butcher's technically overcharging and selling to people because people are paying higher for price per weight. And that's why he's quote unquote robbing them. Ibao, I have a question. What is he saying? He's saying that he makes the meat heavy and robs people because the blood's being absorbed in the limbs. How did therefore technically I'm allowed to do it to myself because I don't care. I'm not selling it. Maybe it's even for a person to do to his own meat. And the Gemara answers Teku. No answer. Someone brings bird meat with cheese on the table. There's no isur. It sounds like you can't put on the same table, but if you do eat it, it's a sword. I see from here, you cannot have bird meat and milk. March is not proof. You explain the Mishnah. Someone brings bird meat and cheese on the table. In a badly day lotaza, it's not considered lotaza, it's not considered doraita, even if that's the banana. But if you happen to eat it, it does not become a doraita. Okay, new Mishnah. بسبب بهمات هورا بحلب بهمات هورا. Meat of a kosher animal with milk of a kosher animal, asur l'shay you can cook. But asur an you can have benefit. بسبب بهمات هورا بحلب بهمات مئة. Meat of a kosher animal with milk of a non-kosher animal. بسبب بهمات مئة بحلب بهمات هورا, the vice versa. The meat of a non-kosher animal with milk of a kosher animal. متر l'shay is allowed to cook, ومتر is allowed to eat benefit. Obviously not eat. ربيع كمان because no, حياة بعوف إنا من التراب. Haya meat, deer and wild undomesticated animals, and bird meat are not asur with milk min natural. Very fascinating. Shnar, but it says lo tova shel gedi b'halavim moshrim. That's mentioned 3 times. You cannot cook a goat with the milk of his mother 3 times. Prat haya the oath of the male excludes non-domesticated animals, birds, and non-kosher animals. There is something more than Shnar, but it says lo techilu kol nevela. You should not eat any nevela, dead animal. ונאמר לפסוק after that, לא תבשל גדי בחלמו, you should not cook the goat with milk of mother. עד שאסור משום נבלה, anything that has a sort of נבלה, يعني you have to slaughter, אסור לבשל חלב, you can't cook milk. או שאסור משום נבלה, not a bird, you cannot have as נבלה, you have as a שחיטה, יכול יהיה אסור בתשל חלב, you might think that it's good to cook with milk, tell more, the pasuk says, בחלב milk with the mother, יצא אוף שאין לו חלב אם, it excludes the bird because the bird does not get milk from its mother. Very interesting mahloket over here, whether or not the bird has a sort of cooking with milk. Rahana men women.